Hi, my name's Cliff Brooks. I am 36 years old. I was born and raised in born in St. Louis. I grew up in House Springs, Missouri, off of Highway MM. Grew up a pretty sheltered life. As a kid, I'm one of six kids. I am the baby, so I got my parents while they were later in life. So my older brothers and sisters kind of had it hard because my parents were kind of hard on them whenever they were younger. So I got the older parents, so I was kind of babied a little bit as a kid. Um, so growing up, it was me, my brother, and my sister in the same house, uh, both older than me. Uh, I came up, everything was perfect. My mom and dad got along. I mean, there was a little bit there behind closed doors, I think, that I didn't really understand that was going on because my dad seemed angry a lot, like kind of towards my mom and kind of bitter. And so the whole time growing up, I was under the impression that like my dad was just an angry person, and it kind of reflected on how I was coming up as a kid. So there's a lot of stuff I was dealing with my anger and like how I treated people. So coming up, the way he would kind of deal with my mom a little bit was a little like kind of standoffish and kind of mean. So I grew up seeing that a lot, a whole lot, and I never really understood why until later on in life. Uh, so about 9 years old, I was molested by a close family member, very close, and that really took a wild turn because I was sheltered, like I said. I was very young and I didn't really understand why it happened. I couldn't really process it. The way my dad was growing up, like I said, he was kind of already an angry person as in my mind. So I knew that if I told my dad that he would probably kill that family member, and I didn't want that family member to get in any trouble or anything like that. So I buried it. I pretended like everything was okay, and that's when I started kind of putting a mask on and acting out a little bit. I started drinking at about age 12 to kind of numb myself because I had been burying that for so long and buried it so far down that I just didn't deal with it. To this day, this is probably the second time I've spit this out of my mouth, so kind of bear with me. So dealing with that, I started drinking and smoking pot at age 12, and I didn't half step it. I went immediately deep, deep, deep into it. I was an alcoholic. I was a marijuana addict, full blown, and I thought it was cool. I started hanging out with other people, other kids that were drinking and smoking all older than me, and I was trying to fit in because at home I was putting on a mask and I could kind of make an escape through that. So hanging out with all the wrong people, I kind of started spending a lot of time away from my house and started kind of being absent from there. So fast forward, uh, I started working, got a job at Emos, and worked there for about 8 years. And I still hadn't talked about the trauma from the past because I didn't want anything to happen still. And so I started doing a little bit of coke then. And as I started doing coke, a little bit of psychedelics came, and then I started dabbling in that a little bit. And so that was a every great often kind of thing. And then when I was 21 years old, I found out that my father had stage 5 lung cancer and that he had 6 months to live. So I remember going out to the car, and at that point in time, I wasn't really religious. But even though I say I wasn't religious, I always cried out to God, and I didn't even understand why at that point in time. You know what I mean? So I remember sitting in the car, and I remember looking up at the sky and telling God I haven't learned enough from my dad, and to not take my dad away from me. And so growing up, sorry. So growing up, the only family I really knew was on my dad's side. We were sheltered from my mom's side of the family. They lived down in Poplar Bluff. Uh, so everything I ever knew as family was my dad's sisters, my aunts and uncles, and all that stuff, and my brothers and sisters. Well, after my dad got sick, I was working full time at Emo's, like I said, and it was my mom at the house taking care of my dad because they brought a hospital bed in and he was going downhill fast. So my mom was taking care of my dad while I was at work. And whenever I got home from work, I had already worked an 8-hour shift and I was exhausted. So I started taking Adderalls so that by the time I made it home and my mom was tired, she could go to sleep and I could stay up and help take care of my father. So that progressed within that like little 4-month, 5-month period of time into popping probably 100 to 200 Adderalls a week. Uh, that progressed. And then right before my father did pass away, my brothers and sisters were around a little bit, but like not really like they should be, you know? And so my whole family, my dad was the glue for my entire family. And he is the one that kept us all around each other. So when he started going downhill, like everybody just kind of started going separate directions already. So before he passed away, uh, he got all of us in the same room at the same time, and his last wish was that we didn't fall apart and start missing out on each other's lives. So he told us to stick together. And so right before he passed away, a friend of mine I grew up with, he's dead now, but a friend of mine I grew up with told me, "Hey man, you're spending a whole lot of money on those Adderall. Like we could just cut to the chase here and you could try this meth out and you could save all kinds of money, you know?" So I was like, "All right, I'll try it." So I tried it and that's when I fell in love. Um, I was able to stay up for days on days on days to help take care of my dad. Uh, I kind of kept it under wraps. No one really knew what was going on because of the spotlight being on my father. So I was okay. So I thought. So fast forward, my dad gets bad, and he's on morphine and all kinds of fentanyl patches and all that stuff. So he passes away. Uh, I watched him take his last breath on his deathbed, and that really, like the death rattle, hearing him take his last breath really kind of sent me off the deep end because I was already dabbling pretty hard in the drugs, and it was my only escape once again, just like my childhood trauma. So the learned behavior I learned from before with the situation from when I was a kid, I stayed numb and I just buried myself getting high on meth. And so 2 days after after my father passed away, I caught my mom and my dad's friend on the back porch doing stuff, and I flipped out. I went and grabbed a gun, and I pointed it at him, and I threatened to shoot him. And my mom was freaking out, and she said he was married, of course. It was both of my parents' friends, so I guess my mom was messing around with him behind her back, behind the wife's back. And my mom freaks out because I got a gun on him, and I was gonna kill him. But my mom tells me that if I don't kill him, that I could have the house and everything inside of it. So I said, okay. I said, get the hell out of here. You know, she said, you can't tell his wife about anything. And I said, I won't. Just stay away from me. I don't want nothing to do with it, you know? So my mom burnt out. Uh, I'm in the house alone. meth addict in the house. I watched my dad take his last breath in, and my mental health was not okay. I was broken, and I could not get numb enough to numb the pain. So I started trying to kind of distract myself by cleaning the house out. Well, by cleaning the house out, my mom had an arts and crafts room, and like the house was a normal family house, you know? Well, as I'm cleaning the house out, I move into my dad's room because the house is mine now. I move into my dad's room. Upon my meth addiction, I met this girl, and she was well known for making drugs, cooking dope, and me and her got together. I thought I was in love, of course, and she showed me how to make dope. So we started cooking dope, cooking dope, cooking dope, and I had as much access to however much I wanted, and that was absolutely horrible. And I also knew how to make more if I wanted more. So I'm making money off of it. I'm burying my feelings. I'm burying everything I ever had a problem with my drug addiction. And so I start cleaning the house as a distraction. As I'm cleaning the house, I find the fentanyl patches and the morphine that my dad was supposedly taking the entire time. So he laid there and suffered the entire time and refused to take his medicine and was hoarding it. So I found the fentanyl patches, I found all that, and there was, I mean, a ridiculous amount, a ridiculous amount. And I tried taking one of the fentanyl patches out and chewing on it, and I liked the feeling, and I really liked that feeling. So that started me on the fentanyl. So the first time I tried it, I was chewing it up, and one of my dope cook buddies showed back up at the house to do something, and walked in and seen me laying there on the bed with the patch hanging out of my mouth. I guess I had overdosed and went out and didn't even realize at that point in time that that was a thing because I wasn't aware of what I was doing. So he woke me up. Um, After he woke me up, we did our thing. Everything was going okay from there, and I was cooking dope, trying to make ends meet, trying to keep the bills paid. And from there, task force kicked the door in. Uh, there was, I think, 19 of them with masks on at about 7 o'clock in the morning. They drop kicked the door off the off the hinges. They came in, arrested me and my girlfriend at the time, but what they found was not what they thought they found. So I kind of got out of that because I had everything under wraps by the time they got there, luckily. Uh, so I went and did a 24-hour hold, and jail really wasn't that bad to me. You know, it didn't really bother me. So I got out, uh, went back to the house. The electric was shut off. Everybody had broken in and stolen half my dad's stuff. Whole bunch of stuff was gone. So at that point, I was like, screw it, I'm just going to sell everything. So I started selling everything for drugs because I was doing bad at that point. Nobody wanted to come around because my door just got kicked in. I couldn't sell anything. I couldn't make any money. The electricity was off. There was nothing I could do. I had my hands tied. So the only thing I knew how to do was sell stuff, you know. I sold pretty much everything out of the house. Uh, as I'm selling everything out of the house and pretty much just burning that bridge, my mom comes back around, and I guess she got caught out there with the husband, and stuff kind of went south where she was living at out there with them. And she said, I'm moving back in. I said, well, I said, this is not what you're going to expect. This is not the house that you left at, you know? And so reality kind of smacked her in the face. And one thing led to another, and she left again, took off. Uh, Throughout this point in time, all my family, like I said, was on my dad's side. So they all went separate ways. So everything that I had put like trust and faith in as a child, like showed me that it's not going to always be there, you know? So that was always in my mind and it followed me throughout my addiction. So pretty much from there on, every situation and every person I had around me, I kept disposable. Like, I refused to build actual relationships with anybody because I felt like it was always going to be ripped away from me no matter how hard I tried, no matter how much I cared. Uh, and I was also surrounded by the wrong people being in the dope game. So I knew from growing up that if I portrayed myself a certain way and I wore that mask and I pretended like everybody was close to me, that I could get what I wanted, you know? So I spent years upon years wearing that mask and using people in the drug game and burning bridges, burning bridges, burning bridges. Well, things got worse. I got locked up again. A few months that time, as I was locked up that few months in county, my family took the house. So I'm thinking I'm gonna get out of jail and go back home, and everything's gonna be like it was, you know. We lived in this house for 25 years. Uh, so I go back to the house, and everything that I had in the house was in a dumpster in the front yard, and there was locks on the doors that I couldn't get in, and so I burned out. I went and I moved in with the kid that introduced me to the meth because I knew that I could get high down there, and they were still being cool to me. So I went down there, and I stayed there for about 4 or 5 years down there, in and out of jail, in and out of jail. They tried to give me drug court. I bounced out on that. And then I finally went to prison. Well, I went to prison, and the main mistake I made going to prison was once I made it to prison, the learned behavior from earlier in my life, I knew that if I made friends with all the people that were the head honchos there, that I could get exactly what I wanted, you know? So I got into prison. I made friends with a lot of the big people. And once I made friends with a lot of the big people, I felt like I was untouchable in there. So I was in there causing chaos. I mean, I gave problems several times, and I spent a lot of time in the hole because all I was doing was crashing out, beating people up, doing drugs. There's more drugs in there than there are out here. Uh, so I'm in there doing drugs, getting high, and just crashing out all the way. Uh, so the whole time in there, the only thing on my mind was I can't wait to get out and get high. So I faked it to make it. I finally acted like I was buckling down, but the whole time I was still using drugs in there. And once I finally got out, uh, I went back down. Well, I went down to Poplar Bluff to my mom's side of the family because my uncle reached out and he said that he was willing to kind of watch over me and take care of me and help me out and help me get on my feet. So I said, okay. So I went down there and I moved in with my uncle. When I moved in with my uncle was also a drug dealer. So we were kind of on the same level, you know, but he had went to prison and got out and kind of had his act together halfway. So I stayed there for a while, got to know that side of the family, and that side of the family was pretty solid. And I got really really close to my uncle. My uncle kind of became like my dad, you know, because after my dad died, I was kind of always running around searching for the right people to surround myself with that I could feel that connection with, and I could just kind of fill that void, you know. So that being said, I built that relationship with my uncle. He kind of took on my dad's role, and he would tell me when I was being an idiot, but he was also kind of being an idiot himself. So it was hard for me to take that advice, you know. But so I meet this girl, and she lives down in St. Louis. So I moved back down to St. Louis with her, and she didn't do drugs. She didn't do nothing. She was innocent. She had no idea what she was getting herself into because I had that troubled past, but I was clean at the time when I got with her. So 6 months into the relationship, I got complacent. I got bored, and I started using again. Started using heroin again, and started stealing her car, going to get heroin. She had no idea what was going on because she was innocent. She was completely blind to that whole lifestyle. Uh, so I started using behind her back. Uh, that leads into me drinking again. So I'm drinking, smoking, doing heroin, and then I started doing meth again. Well, there was a night when a friend of mine that I had grown up with and knew through my sister had been cooking dope for a while, and he called me up and he said, look, he said one of our mutual acquaintances had been sleeping with his baby mama, and he wanted me to go bust the windows out on his car while his car was parked over there. I said, yeah, absolutely, come pick me up. So he came to pick me up, and when he picked me up, he asked me he asked me if I wanted him to stop by and grab his pistol from his buddy's house just in case it goes south when we get over there. And I said, yeah, absolutely. So we stopped by this guy's house. I don't know the guy from Adam. I shake his hand, introduce myself, and I sit down on the couch. Well, when I sit down on the couch, the buddy I showed up with over there got the gun out of the bedroom. He sat down next to me on the couch and he blew his head off across my lap. And that really sent me through the roof because at that point in time I had warrants to go back to prison. And the guy's house it happened at, I said, look, I said, I got warrants right now. I can't deal with this as much as it's killing me right now. I have to go, you know? So I burn out from the scene. I leave. I call the girl that had never been part of that lifestyle at about 3 o'clock in the morning and said, come get me now. She came and picked me up. I still had brains across my lap. Uh, my mom lived in the same apartment complex as us. So I went to my mom's house and had her give me some money for some heroin because at that point, that's the only thing I knew how to be numb with. So I had enough time from my mom's house to make it up to St. Louis to pick up some heroin. And by the time I made it back, the homicide detectives had my apartment surrounded. Uh, so I had warrants to go to prison. So I'm pulling up in the car at about 7 o'clock in the morning, kind of nodded out, not really paying attention. And the poor innocent girl I was with is like, what is going on at our house? I'm like, what are you talking about? And I pull up in the parking spot and they surround us. Um, so after they surround us, they're like, why'd you run? Why'd you run? Like, if you're innocent, why'd you run? They thought I shot the guy. So I said, look, I got warrants. Like, I'm not trying to go to prison. That's the only thing that was, you know? Well, they took me in my house. They did the black powder test on my hand. They seen that I didn't fire the gun. And they told me then, they were like, look, like, you've seen enough shit tonight that, like, you're going to get yourself caught anyways on the path you're on. So we're not going to mess with the warrants right now. You're good to go, you know? So they burned out. So after they burned out, I get on Facebook and everybody's talking. I don't know what the guy's house that happened at said, but I guess he said I went in the guy's pockets before I left because he took some stuff out of his. But I don't know what happened, but I'm getting death threats. I'm getting all kinds of stuff, and I'm going through this an emotional roller coaster. And I'm trying to stay numb, still trying to stay numb and be high, and I just want to bury it, you know. And going through that emotional trauma really, really should have been the turning point in my life where I should have been like, you know, this is maybe where I should get away from this. I don't like what's going on. But instead, uh, I start firing shots back at the people that are talking to me about wondering if I killed the guy, wondering what was going on, you know, and I just unloaded on them, you know what I mean? Uh, so going through all that emotion and all that trauma, I I still didn't know how to deal with it properly and being numb. Uh, I was completely unavailable for that girl, and plus she was checked out already, anyways, due to all the situations that led up to this. So she burned out, left me at the apartment. Uh, After she left me at the apartment, I sold everything in the apartment, and then I went back down to Poplar Bluff. Well, when I went back down to Poplar Bluff, went to move back in with my uncle. As I'm staying with my uncle, like he gets strung back out, and then it's just a flop house. So we are flopping out there, doing drugs, hanging out. I'm going and stealing shit every day so that we can feed our habit. Uh, After that, I go back to prison, and the whole time I'm in prison, I'm thinking about getting out and going to my uncle's house and getting high, getting high. I've been back to prison 6 times now, but every single time I knew that something was missing. Like I was picking up key parts of recovery as I went along my journey, but like nothing ever really clicked and stuck until I started reaching out and kind of like looking at my past and seeing all the troubled times I went through. Regardless of how I felt about God, I was still looking up at the sky and I was still talking to him. Um, I said a lot of bad things about God that I can never take back. Um, but he is forgiving and he is understanding. And I was meant to go through those trials and tribulations to get where I'm at today. While I was in prison, the fourth or fifth time, my uncle died. Uh, so that hit me pretty hard. Uh, Getting out, going back to Poplar Bluff, I just kind of floated around at my cousin's house I had grown a relationship with, and staying there. I did good for maybe 2, 3 weeks. Uh, and then I found out that the kid's house I was living at after my dad passed away for like 5, 6 years, uh, ended up overdosing and dying on heroin. So I went down to St. Louis for the funeral, got high immediately, got strung out, and then went back down to my cousin's house. When I went back down to my cousin's house, I started ripping and roaring. And Poplar Bluff is a very, very small town. So it took me about 3, 4 weeks to get to know everybody that was on dope down there. And it progressed and progressed and progressed. I used past learned behaviors to build relationships with people so I could get what I wanted, which was drugs. And I would kind of fake it to make it, like I was actually building friendships and love with everybody, but I was just using them for what I could. Uh, Fast forward from there, I go back to prison this last time. While I'm in prison, I start looking at all the times that I was lost and that I was looking at the sky and talking. And I started kind of dissecting that. And well, before I went to prison this last time, I went to the recovery house in St. Louis, sober living. And while I was there, I met some pretty solid people and built pretty good relationships with them. And while I was living there, I got a full time job. Loved it. It's something I just kind of landed in. And the people there were amazing. They were all good to me. And it was just a great situation the whole time I was sober. Well, I made it about a year clean. And then I got with this girl and I decided to get my own apartment right next door to my work. And things didn't work out with her. So while I was at the apartment out of sober living, I kind of started numbing myself because I was there alone every day after work. I was going and busting my butt at work. And then once I would get home, I would be alone by myself until I go to work the next day. So being alone by myself, alone with all that trauma undealt with, uh, I started drinking again. I started thinking it was okay to smoke pot. And because it wasn't heroin or it wasn't meth or I made some bad justification to do what I wanted to do. So I started smoking pot again. And before I know it, I was doing coke. And the coke led to meth, and the meth led to heroin. And it was maybe 4 months I have in my apartment. I was already getting kicked out of it. My job, seeing me go downhill, and they were like, "Look, we care about you. We're going to give you a couple weeks off to try to give you a chance. Get your head together. Do what you got to do. It doesn't matter if you got to go to inpatient. We're here for you. We support you. Uh, just get yourself together before you come back." So I told them I would. Went back to my apartment, stayed strung out for the whole 2 weeks, and then I told them I was good to come back. And I went back strung out that day, and they were like, "Look, this isn't going to work out. Like, this is unfortunate. You're a good worker, but it's not going to happen here." So I lost my apartment, lost my job, and I went back to Poplar Bluff because I knew if I went back out there, that I could get as strung out as I wanted to be, and I could be homeless and do everything a drug addict wants to do, you know? So I go back out there. Uh, Took about 3 years. I caught another case. I'm stealing everything in sight. Uh, like I said, it was a mask. I've spent a lot of time portraying being something that I wasn't. Hence the tattoos on the face, the tattoos on the neck. Like I acted like I was a tough individual that had it all together, that would beat you up in a heartbeat, that would rob you in a heartbeat. But that was not the case. Like I did a lot of bad stuff to a lot of good people that didn't deserve it. Um, but come to find out, I'm not that person whatsoever. Uh, I went to prison this last time, and while I was in there, I was seeing everybody in there smoking deuce and falling out. And I went in there, and when I was first in there, I was like, man, I can't wait to get out and get high. I can't wait to get out and get high. And then while I was in there, luckily they give you tablets in there now. And when I got the tablet, I started watching The Chosen because I couldn't afford no movies or nothing like that. So I started watching that, and that kind of reached out to me, and it started having me dissect my life before and reaching out to God. So from watching The Chosen, I started kind of opening up the Pando app and watching sermons a little bit, and it was kind of like finally starting to click, you know. And once it clicked hard, and I started reaching out to God, and I realized that all that time I was burying things and building bad relationships and chasing the wrong stuff, that if I would have been chasing him, then I would have had the cornerstone of my recovery the entire time. Um, Started going to church there, and in there, like, there's a lot of people that go to church just because there's nothing to do. And that's kind of what I was doing at first. There, like, it was kind of just to pass time, to pass time, to pass time. And then as I started going, I started seeing the distance I was starting to make between the people I had built relationships with that were in the wrong lifestyle in there. And they kind of shunned me. And I was kind of persecuted for trying to get my act together. And I swept all that under the rug, and I started surrounding myself with the right people. I mean, as right of people as you can get in there. Uh, there is a lot of good people in there. Uh, so as I'm going to church, I get baptized. And after I got baptized, I gave my life up to God. And I prayed every single night while I was in there from that moment on, because I knew I was going to be getting out eventually, that God would pave the way for me to let the mask down and find somewhere that would accept me for what I was and who I was and how I look and how I portray myself, so that I could be myself and I could be the general person that I know I am. And I knew I was going to be facing that obstacle, you know, because normal church people, they're going to frown on the way I look, on the way I act, on the way I dress. So I was really stressing myself out about that, because I knew that God was the one that was going to keep me out this time, that was going to keep my life together. So I got out. Luckily, I had built that path in the past with the sober living house. So while I was locked up in there, I got a hold of my buddy Max. Uh, that was He was my roommate when I first went through the houses the first time. And fortunately, he stayed clean the entire time I went back out, went down to Poplar Bluff, went to prison. Well, I got his phone number. I had my cousin get his phone number, so I called him and I'm like, "Dude, what are you doing nowadays?" And he said, "Well, I'm kind of one of the guys that run the house now." I was like, "What?" So he had worked himself up pretty high. He actually gets paid to do that job now. Uh, so fortunately, the people I did build relationships with in the sober living were understanding why I kept my distance, because those were relationships that were worth building, and I really was genuine about building those relationships. And fortunately, they were smart enough to see that. So I talked to Max the entire time I was locked up. There wasn't one time he didn't answer the phone. And I was like, man, I might really be onto something, you know. I really do got people that care. And for the first time in a very long time, I was able to rely on someone, you know. So getting a hold of Max, he set it up with my friend Nick now to set me up in the sober living. I talked to Nick on the phone like 3 or 4 times, and they were psyched to have me there, you know. So I get out, I go to sober living, and as I'm in sober living, it was like it was maybe God is so amazing because it was maybe like 2 days of being out of prison. I was in there praying, reading my Bible in my room. I had 3 roommates, and while I was in there, uh, one of my roommates came in that slept all the time. Shout out to Nighthawk Kaka. He came in and he seen me reading my Bible. And while I was reading my Bible, he said, man, I didn't know you read the Bible. You don't look like the type of guy to read the Bible. I said, believe it or not, I do. And while I was reading it, he said he knew of a place that that would come pick us up and take us to church. And I said, man, I said, I don't know about that because this is the obstacle I'm facing. Like, I'm gonna have a hard time with that because I'm I look the way I do, you know. And he said, dude, this is not that. He said, we can wear scrubs if you want to. You know what I mean? He said, you will be comfortable, absolutely. And I said, okay, I'll go out on a limb and I'll try it because this is all I've ever wanted, you know. So I called Scott, and Scott came and picked us up for church. And when I got there, I wasn't looked at weird. Nobody, nobody really judged me at all. I was accepted for the person that I was, and I knew at that point in time that that was going to be my home, and that that was going to be the cornerstone for everything I do in the future. Um, the people there have been there for me. Um, so all the time I spent building false relationships went out the window when I dropped the mask and I turned to God. And I knew that God would pave the way for me to build relationships worth building. And when I got to Cultivate Church that day, I knew I was in the right place because God put me in that place at that time for a reason. And the people I've met there have been amazing to me. They have accepted me for who I am. They have pushed me to be a better person. Uh, so while I was in the sober living, I met my wife. Uh, at that point in time, I was going to Heroin Anonymous meetings, and while I was in a Heroin Anonymous meeting, I heard her cry out about her boyfriend. And me, kind of still being fresh in the recovery program, I went to Old Habits and I reached out and I tried to contact her. And when I contacted her, we kind of hit it off and met up at a friend's get together. And we started hanging out and building a little bit. And I thought it was just going to be a fresh out of prison thing. And then I started kind of picking her brain a little bit. I didn't want to do anything until I got to know her fully, full circle, full transparency. So I spent about 3.5 months trying to pick her brain and see where she was at and see what she was on. Uh, and everything I found, I absolutely loved. Uh, so building that relationship kind of like, I want to say it helped me get over a whole lot of past stuff because all the relationships I was building, God put in my path. And I genuinely had faith in that. And knowing that, I was able to let that mask down and I was able to build the relationships I needed to build. Um, After that, me and her hung out a whole bunch. We ended up getting married in our pastor's basement, February 22nd. It was amazing. I forgot the ring, but it was amazing. um, Scott is now my best friend, one of my mentors. He has pushed me to be a better person. I'm in Bible college. I have a whole lot going for me. I am a manager at the Sober Living House. I have a solid foundation of guys there that I've built relationships with that are going to last forever. They are some of the best people I've ever met in my life. So God took me out of a very, very dark place with a whole lot of trauma, and He turned everything around. And everything I ever prayed for and everything I ever needed to get through all that trauma was placed in my lap. And if you are on the other side of this today and you are looking for a reason to push through, it's worth it. Go to God and He will pave the way.